So could you please state who you are and your organisation and your interest?
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Varmalis. I am the Director of Environment and Engineering at Yarra Ranges Shire Council, and with me is Ms Karen Griffiths, who is our Senior Transport and Developments Engineer, also from Yarra Ranges Council. And Yarra Ranges Council provides the Secretariat support for the Eastern Transport Coalition, which is a group of 7 councils.
Thank you. So we have your reasonably substantial submission, but maybe you could talk to give us an overview of it. We've both read it, I think.
Well, just to outline, probably the biggest issue for us is the boundaries of the taxi boundary. Being on the outer part of metropolitan Melbourne, we've got a community that is split by that boundary. It runs through 3 of our councils. We'd probably go so far as to say it's probably a common issue for all of the interface of Melbourne, but I guess you'll hear from others about that. We've had discussions in the past with taxi operators to understand why it is difficult to have sufficient services outside of that boundary in the Yarra Valley and tourism areas of particularly Yarra Ranges, but it also affects Manningham and Knox. And essentially our understanding is that for the taxi services on the other side of the boundary, which is Yarra Valley Taxis, that they've got potential for 9 licences but are only operating 7 because of viability issues, and that of course impacts on tourism, jobs and a whole lot of other issues for the community, not to mention just the general public trying to get access to services, waiting times and the like. There's also a number of other issues but, that Karen will touch on if that's okay.
Yeah. So the other key issues that we've highlighted in the report involve the proposed or recommended increase of the pre-booked taxis, but because the public transport, particularly in the outer eastern suburbs where the ETC operates, the public transport's quite poor and is mainly buses and very infrequent buses at that. It doesn't cover the areas where people live and need to get to, but also the time slots which people need to travel. So with regards to that, pre-booked taxis is very important because people do need to travel, they want to travel. So recommendations promoting more of that, more of them, you know, we do support particularly around the type of vehicles and advertising. The other areas that we are, or the Eastern Transport Coalition's interested in, is the multi-purpose taxi program, which one of the recommendations suggests to issue public transport tickets to users of the program. This kind of recommendation would be quite good in the inner suburbs where there's a lot of public transport and the distances are short, whereas particularly at the outer eastern suburbs or outer suburbs, journeys are long, there's no public transport. So that would be a very one-sided approach or one-sided support kind of thing. And our other key recommendation or issue is related to the use of bus lanes by taxis. So bus lanes are there to decrease the delays to bus passengers, and while it would be good for taxis to be able to use them, we believe that they shouldn't be used if it disadvantages buses, because at the end of the day, if the bus lanes are taken up or by taxis, they're going to be no purpose to the bus passengers, which is what they were introduced for in the first place.
Yep.
And you picked up a comment about the extension of the MPTP scheme. You might have covered that when I was just distracted, but I think you were questioning whether the proposal that we had to extend this to the 80-year-olds who lose their licence. What was it?
Yeah, well, sort of questioning the impact it would be to the wider community. It would be obviously a good impact for people in the inner suburbs, but but it might sort of discourage people if they have to give up their licence in the outer suburbs, and then they don't get the benefit from the program. That's sort of what I was trying to concentrate on.
Right.
I think that the point of clarification there is that the frequency of bus services and the coverage that we have in the outer suburbs is not the same as inner suburbs, where you've got multiple options and public transport rich, such as trams and a train network that you can jump onto quite frequently. When you get out to the outer areas of metropolitan Melbourne, you'll find that bus services at best will be 30 minutes. Trains are something similar. And so it's just not, the convenience isn't quite the same, and the door-to-door availability is not there either.
Yeah, I understood that. It was just the other issue about extending the scheme to 80-year-olds and so on. It sounded to me like you thought that was going to be I don't know, a negative thing rather than be seen as positive.
Not negative as in total negative. It's just it might, it'd be negative for people out, sort of in the outer areas.
Yeah. Okay. Just in terms of the eastern area of Melbourne, how do you see the availability of cabs generally? I mean, there's problems created by the zones and borders.
Yes.
But in terms of availability,
I think the further you get away from the population centres or your activity areas such as Ringwood, Box Hill, I mean, there are taxis around, but the availability is not what you'd see as you get towards Melbourne. And we hear through our community issues of people having to wait or perhaps not getting the taxi that they expect on time to get to appointments. And our community services people will tell you that they've done studies on the impact of somebody missing a medical appointment by their taxi not turning up on time, and the flow and impacts of that can be quite substantial, because they may not be able to then get that medical appointment for some time, and their health may deteriorate, and then the flow-on effects go from there. Our understanding of taxis in the Yarra Valley area, the viability issue for them is due to a lot of the premium work that is contracted out going to the larger providers, so they're not getting access to the contracts for work cover or Veterans Affairs and those large contracts that are put out, and so that's why they're relying on local bookings, and that impacts on the viability of services in the Yarra Valley and the tourism areas of our region. And we hear stories of B&B operators that are playing taxi at night by taking patrons to and from wineries, or weddings that are happening out in the large venues that we have out in the Yarra Valley, that they can't rely on sufficient numbers of taxis to transport guests back to where they may have come from. So the flow-on effect of that is, does that then present a risk of people driving when perhaps they've had a couple of drinks and they don't have an option to gain access to taxi services?
Is that a zoning issue, or is that
I think it's a zoning
just
issue.
an availability issue generally?
I think it's a combination of both from our limited understanding. If you've heard of Rochford Wineries, and they have their Day on the Green events, they have 8,000 to 10,000 people come to their venue. There's no availability of public transport. Taxis aren't an option for people going to there, where they bus people in. So a lot of our tourism operators are having to make their own arrangements because the services aren't there to support them. And it's all about boundaries, basically.
So the industry has talked a lot about there being agreeing there's a problem at Friday and Saturday night peaks, but sounds like it's more than that.
From what we're hearing, we would believe so. Certainly, daytime for community trying to get to shopping and appointments during the day. The other thing with our community is, particularly in the Yarra Ranges, there's people that are socially disadvantaged, so they can only afford to have one car. And so if the husband takes the car off to work for the day, then people are isolated because of that. And the other thing too is there's distance with fares that people have to pay because of being where they are in relation to the activity areas. It's a half-hour drive from Healesville to Lilydale.
And have you sort of investigated it all or had any discussions with the taxi industry about share rides and those possibilities?
We have had some time back 1-3 cabs come to us. They had this proposal of, I'm not sure how far they took it in the industry, but they were looking for support from Eastern Transport Coalition and the member councils for almost setting up a regional service where it might have been something in the order of 40 maxi cabs that they were going to run. Their proposal, and it's probably best you hear from them, but my recollection was that they were going to be all maxi cabs, and that they were going to keep them in a ring-fenced area so that it was almost Eastlink out to the east, and it would allow for a good level of service for the community. They were going to rely on offering services to clubs and senior citizens and groups like that to set up pre-bookings and routine services. They'd also make arrangements with the tourism operators to better provide for them their needs. And there was because they were running maxi cabs, they'd also be able to cater for those that rely on wheelchair access. It was quite an attractive proposal from our point of view when compared to the number of taxis that we currently have floating around. But I don't believe they were able to proceed with that initiative based on, I guess, the constraints of the current industry.
Do you know what they were, the constraints?
I think it was all about they were looking for a permit process as opposed to buying licences to make it financially viable.
Okay.
All right, well, that's a very useful perspective. Thank you very much from your area. So thanks very much for your
Sure.
submission.
Thank you.
Happy to contribute.
Thank you.
I think we've